Ambassador Vela stood alone in the waiting chamber. Her 3 hearts beat fast inside her chest. Through the tall windows, she could see the twin suns of the council world setting behind the silver towers. The light made her pale skin glow soft blue. She pressed her thin fingers together and tried to calm herself. 40 cycles. She had spent 40 cycles preparing for this moment. 40 cycles of learning the proper words, the correct gestures, the formal phrases that might save her people. And now the moment had come, and she felt like a small child standing before giants. The Keenerai were not a warrior species. They never had been. Her people had soft bodies and gentle hearts. They had 3 hearts, actually, and all 3 of them beat for peace. For thousands of years, the Keenerai had devoted themselves to healing, to art, to understanding the universe through quiet study. They built hospitals instead of warships. They trained doctors instead of soldiers. This had always been enough. The galaxy was large, and the Keenerai had never bothered anyone. They had never taken what was not theirs. They had never raised weapons against another species. But now the Krethax horde was coming. Vela had seen the reports. Everyone had seen the reports. The Krethax were insect creatures with hard shells and cold eyes. They moved from world to world like a plague of locusts, taking everything and leaving nothing behind. 17 civilizations had fallen to them in the past 200 cycles. 17 species now served as slaves in Krethax mines and factories. And Valorith, the peaceful homeworld of the Keenerai, stood directly in their path. The doors before her slid open with a soft sound. A tall creature with 4 arms gestured for her to enter. The council chamber awaited. Vela walked forward on trembling legs. The chamber was round and vast. Seats rose in circles around a central platform. And in those seats sat representatives from the 12 most powerful species in the known galaxy. Vela recognized some of them from her studies. The Torvax with their stone-like skin, the Millenni who breathed liquid instead of air, the Vorthani who communicated through colors that rippled across their bodies. And there, in the back row, sat the newcomers. The humans. Vela did not look at them for long. Humans made her nervous. They came from a world called Earth, a place so dangerous that most species could not survive there for even a single day. Heavy gravity crushed bones. Extreme heat and cold killed within hours. The very air carried invisible radiation, and the other creatures on that world spent most of their time trying to eat each other. Yet somehow humans had survived. More than survived. They had built cities, created technology, and launched themselves into the stars. 3 cycles ago, they had joined the Galactic Council. Most species kept their distance from humans. Vela understood why. There was something unsettling about creatures who came from such a violent world. Something dangerous in the way they moved, in the way their eyes tracked movement, in the way they smiled and showed their teeth. She pushed the thought aside. Humans were not her concern today. Today, she needed to focus on saving her people. Vela stepped onto the central platform. Lights brightened around her. The council fell silent. She began to speak. Her voice was soft at first, almost a whisper. She spoke of Valorith, of its gentle forests and quiet cities. She spoke of her people, of their long history of peace and healing. She described the children who would never grow up, the elders who would never share their wisdom, the artists who would never create their masterpieces if the Krethax came. And then she made her request. "We ask for assistance," Vela said. Her voice grew stronger with each word. "We do not ask for much. Perhaps 50 soldiers. A few small warships. Enough to show the Krethax that we are not completely alone. Enough to give us a chance to negotiate." Her 3 hearts pounded so loud, she was certain the whole chamber could hear them. "The Keenerai have always believed in the goodness of others," she continued. "We have always believed that when someone is in danger, those with the power to help will choose to do so. Today, we place our faith in this council. Today we ask you to prove that our belief was not foolish." She stopped speaking. The chamber remained silent. Vela looked from face to face, searching for some sign of hope. She saw sympathy in some eyes. She saw pity in others. But she did not see what she needed most. She did not see anyone ready to help. The Torvax ambassador spoke first. His voice rumbled like stones grinding together. The council offers its deepest sympathies to the Kinarai people. However, our own borders require protection. We cannot spare military resources at this time. The Millenni bubbled something that translated as agreement. The Vorthani flashed colors that meant the same thing. One by one, the great powers of the galaxy offered their regrets. One by one, they explained why they could not help. The Krythax were everyone's problem, but no one's priority. Resources were limited. Wars were expensive. And the Kinari, peaceful and kind as they were, had nothing of strategic value. Vela felt her hope draining away like water into sand. Then a voice cut through the chamber. A voice that spoke the common tongue with a strange accent, hard and sharp. The Sol Confederation formally accepts the Kinari request for assistance. Every head in the chamber turned. Vela turned too. The human ambassador had risen from her seat. She was a tall woman with dark skin and gray hair, cut very short. Her face was lined with age, but her eyes were bright and fierce. She wore a uniform of deep blue, decorated with small metal symbols that Vela did not recognize. Captain Adora Okonkwo, someone whispered nearby. She commands their second fleet. The council members stared at the human with expressions, ranging from surprise to confusion to something that looked almost like fear. Ambassador Okonkwo, the Torvax said slowly. Surely you understand that intervening in Krythax territory carries significant risk. The horde is vast. The Kinari world has no strategic importance to Earth. Why would humanity involve itself in such a conflict? Okonkwo smiled. It was not a gentle smile. It showed her teeth. "'Cause someone asked for help," she said simply. "Where I come from, that is reason enough." The chamber erupted in whispers. Species who had not spoken in centuries found themselves agreeing on one thing. The humans had lost their minds. Vela stood frozen on the platform. Relief flooded her 3 hearts. Someone had said yes. Someone was willing to help. Her people might survive after all. She looked at the human. Captain with gratitude shining in her eyes. Captain Okonkwo looked back. And in that moment, something passed between them. A promise. An understanding Vela did not know it yet, but she had just made a decision that would change the fate of her entire species. She had just invited humanity into her star system. She had asked for assistance. She had no idea. What was coming? 3 weeks passed after the council meeting. Vela returned to Valorith and waited. She told her people that help was coming. She told them to have hope. She told them that the humans had promised to send assistance. Her people asked questions. How many ships? How many soldiers? When would they arrive? Vela did not have answers. The humans had not shared details. Captain Okonkwo had simply said that a force would be sent and that the Kinari should prepare for their arrival. Prepare for what, exactly? Vela did not know. She imagined a small convoy. Perhaps 5 or 6 ships. Maybe 100 soldiers. Enough to show the Krythax that the Kinari were not completely alone. Enough to give them a voice at the negotiating table. That was what assistance meant, was it not? A helping hand. A small gesture of support. The Kinari prepared modest quarters for their expected guests. They set aside food that they hoped humans could eat. They practiced simple phrases in the human language, wanting to make their protectors feel welcome. On the morning of the 22nd day, the jump gate at the edge of the system activated. Vela was on the observation deck of the Kinari Central Station when it happened. She stood by the wide window, watching the stars, waiting for that first glimpse of human kindness. The gate flashed bright white. Something came through. Vela squinted at the viewport. The ship was far away, just a dark shape against the stars. But something about it seemed wrong. It seemed too big. Much too big. She turned to her sensor operator. What is that? The operator was a young Kinari named Telov. His 3 hearts beat visible beneath his translucent skin. He stared at his instruments with wide eyes. I do not understand, Telov whispered. The readings must be wrong. What did they say? Telef swallowed hard. They say that ship is 9 kilometers long. Vela felt her legs grow weak. 9 kilometers. That was larger than most Canary cities. That was larger than anything she had ever seen. That cannot be correct, she said. Check again. Before Telef could respond, the jump gate flashed again. Another ship came through. This one was just as large as the first. Then another flash, and another. And another ships poured through the gate like water through a broken dam. They kept coming and coming and coming. Destroyers with sleek hulls and bristling weapons, frigates moving in tight formations, transport vessels the size of mountains, and behind them all, more carriers, each one large enough to block out the stars. Telef made a small sound. It was not quite a word. It was the sound a creature makes when their mind cannot process what their eyes are seeing. How many? Vela asked. Her voice came out as a whisper. Telef's fingers trembled over his instruments. 17,000 vessels. Still counting. 2 million soldiers, according to their transponder signals. He looked up at her with something like terror in his eyes. Ambassador. They brought an armada. The largest ship moved into position directly between Valorith and the distant stars. For a moment, the sun disappeared behind it. The whole observation deck fell into shadow. Vela stared at that massive vessel. She could see its name painted on the hull in letters tall enough to be read from orbit UNS. Perseverance. Her communications panel beeped. An incoming transmission? With shaking hands, Vela accepted it. Captain Okonkwo's face appeared on the screen. The human woman looked calm, almost relaxed. She sat in a command chair surrounded by blinking lights and busy crew members. Ambassador Vela Okonkwo said with a slight nod. The Sol Confederation sends its regards. We apologize for any delay in our arrival. We came as quickly as we could. Vela opened her mouth. No words came out. She closed it. She tried again. Captain, she finally managed to say. There must be some mistake. We only requested assistance. A small security detail. Perhaps 50 soldiers? Okonkwo tilted her head. She looked genuinely confused. Okay, Ambassador, this is small. We left the 2nd and 3rd fleets back home. We did not want to seem too aggressive. Behind Vela, Telef fainted. His body hit the floor with a soft thump. No one moved to help him. Everyone on the observation deck was frozen, staring at the human ships that filled their sky. Vela tried to understand what she was hearing. This was small? There were more of them? How many ships did humanity have? I see, Vela said weakly. She did not see at all. Okonkwo smiled. It was that same unsettling expression, the one that showed teeth. But now Vela saw something else in it. Something warm. Something almost kind. Kinari asked for help, the captain said. Humanity does not do things halfway. Now, may we have permission to land? My Marines have been doing exercises in the cargo holds for 6 days. They are getting restless. Permission to land. 2 million soldiers wanted permission to land on her peaceful world. 2 million warriors from a death planet carrying weapons that Vela could not even imagine. What choice did she have? Permission granted, Vela heard herself say. Far away in a star system, 3 jumps from Valorith. Supreme Warlord Krikstar of the Krithax Horde received a report. He sat on his command throne, a massive seat made from the bones of conquered enemies. His hard shell gleamed under the red lights of his bridge. His 4 arms rested on the armrests, each hand fitted with sharp claws that could tear through metal. Krikstar had conquered 17 civilizations. He had crushed armies and burned worlds. He had never known fear. Fear was for the weak. Fear was for prey. His intelligence officer approached the throne. The smaller Kreox kept his head low, a sign of respect and submission. Speak, Krikstar commanded, Supreme Warlord. We have received updated information about the Velareth system. Good. How many defenders do the soft ones have? 10 ships? 20? The intelligence officer hesitated. His mandibles clicked nervously. Speak! Krikstar repeated. His voice carried a warning. Canary have received assistance, Supreme Warlord. The humans have sent a fleet. Crixthar made a dismissive gesture with one of his forearms. Humans, the newcomers. How large is their fleet? 12 vessels? 24? The officer held out a data tablet. His claws trembled. Crixthar took the tablet. He read the report. He read it again. Then he read it a third time, certain that his eyes were deceiving him. 17,000 ships. 2 million soldiers. Enough firepower to crack a planet open like an egg. Is this a joke? He asked quietly. No, Supreme Warlord. Crixthar stared at the report. He had expected to conquer a world of peaceful healers. He had expected no resistance. He had expected a simple victory. He had not expected the galaxy's newest and strangest species to show up with what looked like their entire military, for the first time in 400 years of conquest. The Krethax horde did something it had never done before. It stopped. Crixthar sat alone on his throne for a long time after his officers left. He thought about the humans. He thought about their death world. He thought about what kind of creatures could survive such a place, and deep in his cold heart, in a place he did not know existed, something stirred. It felt like fear. He did not like it at all. The Qunari had studied humans from a distance. They had read reports and watched recordings. They knew the basic facts about Earth and its dangerous nature. They understood, in an academic way, that humans came from a world that tried to kill them every single day, but knowing something and understanding it are two very different things. Vela learned this truth in the days after the human fleet arrived. The first human soldiers landed near a small farming village called Tessora. The village elders were terrified. They had heard stories about Deathworld creatures. They expected monsters. Instead, they met Sergeant James Chen. Chen was a short man with a friendly smile. He spoke slowly and carefully, knowing that many Qunari were still learning the human language. When the village elders offered him water, he accepted it with both hands and bowed his head in thanks. "We are here to help," he told them. "Just tell us what you need." The village had a problem. Their irrigation system had broken during a recent storm. Without it, their crops would die. They had been struggling to repair it for days. But the work required going into the deep channels where the water was cold and the current was strong. For a Qunari, such conditions were deadly. Chen looked at the broken system. He looked at the cold water rushing through the channels. Then he took off his jacket and jumped in. The Qunari screamed. They thought he was killing himself. Water that cold would stop a Qunari heart in minutes. They rushed to the edge, reaching out their hands, crying for him to come back. Chen surfaced with a confused expression on his face. Water dripped from his hair. His skin had turned slightly blue from the cold. "What is wrong?" he asked. "Did I do something offensive?" The village elder stared at him. "The cold. You will die." Chen laughed. It was a strange sound, warm and genuine. This is nothing. You should see the lakes where I grew up. We used to swim in water colder than this for fun." He dove back under. For the next 3 hours, he worked in that freezing water, fixing pipes and clearing debris. Other human soldiers joined him. They treated the deadly cold like a minor inconvenience. When they finally climbed out, shivering but alive, they asked if there was anything else they could help with. The Qunari did not know what to say. Word spread quickly across Velaroth. Stories traveled from village to village, each one more impossible than the last, in the eastern mountains. A human doctor named Sarah walked for 20 kilometers through a sandstorm to reach an injured Qunari child. The storm carried particles that could tear through Qunari's skin in minutes. Sarah wrapped a cloth around her face and kept walking. When she arrived, her exposed skin was red and bleeding. She ignored her wounds and treated the child first. In the capital city, a fire broke out in a residential tower. The heat was intense enough to melt Qunari bone. 3 human firefighters ran into the burning building without hesitation. They emerged carrying for unconscious Qunari, their uniforms smoking, their faces covered in ash. When asked why they had risked their lives, they seemed confused by the question. "People were in danger," one of them said. What else were we supposed to do? Vela began to collect these stories. She filled notebook after notebook with accounts of human behavior. She was trying to understand something that seemed impossible. The humans were terrifying. There was no denying this. They could survive conditions that would kill any other species. They healed from wounds that should have been fatal. They kept moving when their bodies should have stopped. They were built for violence in ways that made the Canary uncomfortable, but they were also kind. This was the part that Vela could not understand. The humans had evolved on a world of constant death. They had spent millions of years fighting to survive. By all logic, they should have become cruel creatures, caring only for themselves. Instead, they had learned to protect each other. They had developed something called compassion, and now, for reasons that made no sense, they extended that protection to complete strangers. One evening, Vela sat with Captain Okonkwo on a balcony overlooking the capital. The twin suns were setting, painting the sky in shades of orange and pink. "I do not understand your people," Vela admitted. Okonkwo smiled softly. "You are not the first to say that. You come from a world of death. You are built for violence. Yet your soldiers spend their free time playing with our children and helping our farmers. Why?" The captain was quiet for a long moment. She watched the sun sink below the horizon. "On Earth," she said finally, "we have a saying. The measure of a person is not how they treat the powerful. It is how they treat those who cannot help them in return." She turned to look at Vela. "We learned something on our death world, Ambassador. We learned that the universe is cold and cruel and does not care if we live or die. So we decided to care for each other. We decided that if the universe would not be kind, then we would be kind instead." Vela felt her 3 hearts swell with an emotion she could not name, far away. In the Krathax command ship, Warlord Krixar reviewed intelligence reports about the humans. The reports were disturbing. His scouts had observed human soldiers engaging in something called training. They ran toward each other at full speed and crashed together, knocking each other to the ground. Then they got up and did it again, and again, and again. They called this fun. They lifted heavy objects over and over for no practical purpose. They called this exercise. They ate a chemical called capsaicin, a substance that caused burning pain in most species. They put it in their food on purpose. They called it spicy and seemed to enjoy it. 1. Report described a human ritual called the Ice Bucket Challenge. Humans would pour freezing water over their own heads and then challenge their friends to do the same. They did this willingly. They laughed while doing it. Krixar read report after report. Each one was worse than the last. The humans did not fight like normal creatures. They did not stop when they were hurt. They did not retreat when they were outnumbered. They kept coming, kept fighting, kept pushing forward, long after any reasonable species would have surrendered. And through it all, they smiled. They made jokes. They laughed at death. His intelligence officer approached carefully. "Supreme Warlord, there is more. More. What could possibly be more?" The humans appear to have formed emotional attachments to the Kinari. Our scouts report that human soldiers are referring to the planet as being under their protection. They are using words like family and friends. Krixar stared at his officer. "They have known the Kinari for less than 1 cycle. Yes, Supreme Warlord. And they already consider them family?" "Yes, Supreme Warlord." The humans appear to form strong bonds very quickly. Our psychological analysts believe this is a survival adaptation from their death world. Krixar sat back on his throne. He had conquered species that fought hard. He had conquered species that surrendered easily. He had conquered species that were cunning and species that were strong. He had never faced a species that would adopt complete strangers as family and then fight to the death to protect them. The nightmares started that night. In his dreams, Krixar saw human faces. They were smiling. They were always smiling. He woke up screaming. Warlord Krixar was many things. He was cruel. He was powerful. He was feared across 17 conquered worlds. But he was not stupid. He knew he could not defeat the human armada in direct battle. His fleet was large, But the humans had brought something terrifying to Velaroth. His scouts reported that human ships carried weapons that could crack moons. They reported that human soldiers trained for combat every single day, sometimes for 10 or 12 hours without rest. They reported that humans considered pain to be a minor inconvenience. A direct attack would be suicide, so Krixar chose a different path. He chose deception. On the 43rd day after the human arrival, a single Krethok ship entered the Velarath system. It was small, barely larger than a transport vessel. It carried no weapons. On its hull, it displayed the ancient symbol of peaceful contact. A white circle on a black field. The ship broadcast a message on all frequencies. The message was simple. The Krythax horde requests a diplomatic meeting. We come in peace. Vela received the message on the observation deck. She stared at it for a long time. The Krythax had never requested peace before. In 400 years of conquest, they had never once chosen words over weapons. She did not trust it. But she also could not refuse. The Canary believed in giving every creature a chance to choose a better path. Captain Okonkwo was less generous. It is a trick, she said flatly. They stood together in the council chamber, surrounded by Canary advisors and human officers. The Krethaks do not negotiate. They take what they want. Perhaps, Vela replied. But if there is even a small chance for peace, we must try. That is the Kinari way. Okonkwo studied her for a long moment. Then she nodded slowly. Very well. But my soldiers will be present. And if the Krethaks try anything, they will regret it. The meeting took place on a neutral station at the edge of the system. The station was old, built centuries ago by a species that no longer existed. Its halls were empty, and its lights flickered with age. Vela walked through those dim corridors with Captain Okonkwo at her side. Behind them came a dozen human marines, their faces hard and their hands resting on their weapons. The Kreox delegation waited in the central chamber. There were only 3 of them. 2 were guards, large and covered in thick armor. The third was Krixthar himself. Vela had never seen a Kraythax warlord in person. He was massive, nearly 3 meters tall, with 4 powerful arms and a shell that gleamed like polished metal. His eyes were dark and cold, like holes cut into the void of space. But Vela noticed something else. Something small. A tiny tremor in his claws, a slight tension in his stance. The mighty warlord was afraid. Krixthar spoke first. His voice was deep and harsh, like stones scraping together. I will be direct, he said. The Krythax horde has no quarrel with the Canary. They are weak. They have nothing we want. We were simply passing through their space on our way to richer targets. He turned his cold eyes to Okonkwo. But you, humans, you are different. You interest us. You come from a death world. You are strong. Perhaps we could find common ground. Okonkwo said nothing. She simply watched him with those strange forward-facing eyes that all humans had. Predator eyes, Vela realized. Eyes designed to track prey? Krixthar continued. I propose a compromise. The Krethaks will withdraw all claims to Velarath. We will leave this system and never return. In exchange, the humans must also leave. Return to your death world. Go back to your own wars. This is not your fight. The chamber fell silent. Vela held her breath. Krixthar spread his forearms in a gesture of reasonableness. Think about it, Captain. Why should humans die for strangers? The Canary cannot help you. They have no resources, no technology, no strategic value. They are simply soft creatures on a soft world. Is that worth the lives of your soldiers? It was a clever argument. Vela could see the logic in it. The Krythax were offering to walk away. All the humans had to do was leave. No battle, no death. Everyone could go home. She looked at Okonkwo, suddenly afraid of what she might see. Would the human accept? Would she decide that the Canary were not worth the trouble? Okonkwo was quiet for a long moment. When she finally spoke, her voice was calm and steady. You make a reasonable argument, Warlord? I can see why you have conquered so many worlds. You understand how most species think. You understand that most creatures are rational, that they calculate costs and benefits, that they will eventually decide that strangers are not worth dying for. She took a step forward. Crixthar did not step back, but his claws tightened. But you have made a mistake, Okonkwo continued. You have assumed that humans think like everyone else. We do not. She reached into her uniform and pulled out a small object. It was a photograph, old and worn, showing a young woman standing in front of a simple house. Do you know who this is? Okonkwo asked. This is my great-grandmother. Her name was Amara, during the water wars on Earth. She walked 40 kilometers through a desert to bring medicine to a village of strangers. She had no water. She had no supplies. The heat nearly killed her 3 times. When she finally arrived, she collapsed and did not wake up for 2 days. Okonkwo put the photograph away. When people asked her why she did it, she gave a simple answer. She said, because they needed help, and I could give it. The captain's eyes locked onto Crixthar's face. That was 150 years ago, Warlord. 5 generations of my family have lived and died since then. And do you know what? We have not changed. Not even a little bit. My mother served on a rescue ship that saved colonists from a dying world. My father spent 30 years building hospitals on planets he would never see again. My daughter is training to be a combat medic so she can run toward danger instead of away from it. Her voice grew harder. This is who we are. This is what Earth made us. You think we will abandon the Canary because they have nothing to offer us? You think we will leave because it is the rational choice? She smiled. It was not a friendly smile. Warlord, we are humans. We crossed an ocean of stars to help people we had never met. We brought 2 million soldiers to protect a world that most of the galaxy had forgotten. We did this because someone asked for help. That is all the reason we have ever needed. Okonkwo leaned closer. Crixthar leaned back. He could not help it. So here is my answer to your offer, the captain said softly. No, we will not leave. We will not abandon the Canary. You can wait as long as you want. You can threaten us. You can try to outlast us. It will not matter. 100 years from now, there will still be human ships in this system. 1,000 years from now, our children's children will still be standing guard. She straightened up and clasped her hands behind her back. The Canary are under our protection now, and we protect our own. The chamber was completely silent. Crixthar stared at the human captain. He searched her face for any sign of doubt, any hint of weakness. He found nothing. Only certainty. Only steel. He had conquered 17 civilizations. He had broken countless enemies. He had never met anyone like this. For the first time in his long life, Warlord Crixthar understood he had made a terrible mistake. He had picked a fight with humanity, and humanity did not know how to give up. The Krethax attacked on the first day of spring. Crixthar had gathered every ship the Horde possessed. 300,000 vessels filled the space beyond the Velaroth system, blocking out the stars like a swarm of metal locusts. It was the largest fleet the Kreox had assembled in living memory. Every warlord, every warrior, every ship that could fly had answered the call. This was not just a battle. This was everything. Win or lose. The fate of the Horde would be decided here. Crixthar stood on the bridge of his flagship and gave the order to attack. The Krethax fleet surged forward like a wave of death on the human carrier Perseverance. Captain Okonkwo watched the enemy approach. Her face was calm. Her hands were steady. Around her, human officers moved with quiet efficiency, each one knowing exactly what to do. All ships, battle stations, she said into her communicator. Today we show the galaxy what humanity is made of. 17,000 human vessels moved into formation. They were outnumbered almost 20 to 1. By any reasonable calculation, they should have retreated. They should have run. They did not run. The 2 fleets collided in a storm of fire and light. Human destroyers cut through Kreox formations like knives through water. They moved in perfect coordination, each ship trusting its neighbors. Each captain knowing that their comrades would be exactly where they needed to be. Years of training, generations of warfare, centuries of learning to work together as one united force. The Krathax fought with numbers and rage. The humans fought with skill and trust. Vela watched the battle from the observation deck of the central station. She had refused to evacuate. This was her world, her people's home. If Velaroth fell, she would fall with it. But as she watched, she began to believe that Velaroth would not fall. The human ships took terrible damage. She saw vessels burning, hulls cracking, explosions blooming in the darkness of space. But the humans kept fighting. Ships that should have been destroyed continued to fire their weapons. Crews that should have been dead refused to die. The Perseverance absorbed enough firepower to destroy a small moon. Its hull was blackened and torn. Entire sections were open to space. But its guns never stopped firing. And Captain Okonkwo's voice never wavered as she gave her orders. The real horror for the Krathax came when they tried to board human ships. Krixthar had ordered his warriors to capture the human carrier, remember Johannesburg? He believed that taking a major vessel would break human morale. He sent 5,000 of his best soldiers, warriors who had conquered worlds and crushed armies. They breached the hull and poured into the ship. Expecting to slaughter a weakened crew, the humans were waiting for them. The corridors of the Remember, Johannesburg, were narrow. Too narrow for the Krathax to use their numbers. The fighting became close and brutal, exactly the kind of combat that humans had been born for. Marine Sergeant Rodriguez took a blade through her shoulder in the first minute of fighting. She pulled it out, threw it back at the Krathax who had stabbed her, and kept fighting. When her rifle ran out of ammunition, she used it as a club. When the club broke, she used her fists. Private Chen, no relation to the sergeant who had fixed the irrigation system, held a corridor alone for 7 minutes against a wave of Krathax warriors. He was shot 3 times. He did not fall. When reinforcements finally arrived, they found him standing over a pile of enemy bodies, bleeding from a dozen wounds. Asking if anyone had water, because he was thirsty, the Krathax had never faced anything like this. They were used to enemies who surrendered when wounded. They were used to species who fled when outnumbered. They were used to creatures who valued their own lives above all else. Humans did not surrender. Humans did not flee. Humans kept fighting long after their bodies should have stopped, driven by something the Kreox could not understand. Love, duty, stubborn, refusal to let their friends down. The boarding parties were destroyed to the last warrior. Not a single Krathax made it back to their ships. In space, the battle turned. Human tactics were simply better. Human coordination was simply stronger. Human pilots flew maneuvers that should have killed them, their bodies somehow surviving forces that would have crushed any other species. They pushed their ships beyond all limits, because limits were just suggestions to a creature from a death world. After 6 hours of fighting, the Krathax fleet began to break apart. Ships that had never retreated in 400 years of conquest turned and ran. Warriors who had laughed at death suddenly discovered that they very much wanted to live. The great swarm that had blocked out the stars scattered like leaves in a storm. Krixtar's flagship drifted dead in space, its engines destroyed, its weapons silent. A human boarding party cut through the hull and found the Supreme Warlord sitting alone on his throne, waiting. The leader of the boarding party was a 19-year-old corporal named David Park, from a city called Cleveland. He was short and thin, with a friendly face that made him look even younger than he was. He pointed his rifle at the most feared conqueror in the galaxy. Supreme Warlord Krixthar, he said. You are under arrest for crimes against sentient life. Please come with me. And, watch your head on the doorframe. It's kind of low. Krixthar stared at the young human. This child had just captured him. This small, soft-looking creature had brought down an empire. He started to laugh. It was not a happy sound. The Battle of Velareth was over. 3 days later, Bella stood with Captain Okonkwo on a balcony overlooking the capital city. The twin suns shone bright and warm. In the streets below, Canary and humans walked together, talking and laughing. Children of both species played games that they had invented together. The Krathax horde had surrendered unconditionally. Already, reports were coming in from across the galaxy. Species that the Krathax had enslaved for centuries were rising up. The Horde's empire was falling apart, and it would never come back together. I still do not fully understand, Vela said softly. We are strangers. We had nothing to offer you. No resources. No strategic value. Nothing. Why did you really come? Okonkwo was quiet for a moment. She looked up at the stars, at the vast and dangerous universe that had shaped her species into what they were. Because you asked, she said simply. And where we come from? That is enough. Ayla felt tears forming in her eyes. Kinari did not cry often, but when they did, the tears were silver. Thank you, she whispered. Thank you for saving my people, Okonkwo smiled. This time, it was a gentle smile without any teeth. Thank us by being happy, she said. Thank us by living in peace. That is all we have ever wanted for anyone. Across the galaxy, other species watched what had happened at Velaruth. They watched the recordings of human soldiers jumping into freezing water to help strangers. They watched humans run into burning buildings. They watched a 19-year-old corporal capture a warlord who had terrorized the stars for centuries, and they began to hope. Messages started arriving at the Soul Confederation. Desperate messages from forgotten worlds. Pleas from species that had given up long ago. All of them asking the same question. Will the humans help us too? And somewhere in the Sol system, humanity looked up at the stars and gave the only answer they knew how to give. We are on our way. The galaxy would never be the same, but for the first time in a very long time, it had a chance to be better.